Hi everybody and welcome to our lean-in session. As always, I'm Michael Linke here at the Institute of Architects and it's great to have you with me yet again. You are in for a real treat today. David Jenyns joins me for an hour and he's going to be presenting on how systems and processes can supercharge a business, improve our outputs and really help us all thrive. David's a huge fan of efficiency and he does things smarter and not harder. And so he's going to encourage us on how we can develop really robust ways of doing things that can help make our practices so much easier. And Dave's going to share with us the key tips on how we can create time, how we can reduce errors, and how we can enhance our profits with some of the proven business systems that he's introduced previously. As always, this session will be recorded and the recording will be available on our dedicated COVID-19 resource page on the Institute website as always. You'll also have the opportunity to ask questions. So if you have any burning questions for Dave, pop them into the chat box. I'll go through these with him at the end of the session as well. A little bit about Dave. I've spent the night reading up more and more about this chap and he fascinates me greatly. He's most well known for famously selling the MCG for $24.95 at the tender age of 21 back in the early noughties. And he's very well known as a TED Talk presenter, can be seen on TV fairly often as well as in print media. And nowadays he spends his time not only working in business, of course, but also as a very respected business advisor. Since then, Dave's business experiences span from franchising retail clothing stores to founding some of Australia's most trusted digital agencies, a company called Melbourne SEO Services. Back in 2016, then Dave successfully systemized himself out of that business, hired his own CEO, and then stepped back from the daily operations. And so through this process, he became very much a devotee of some really strong system processes. And he founded Systemology. And we're really thrilled to welcome Dave, and he joins me now. Dave, great to have you with us. How are you today?
Yes, fantastic. Thank you for the introduction and looking forward to really delivering some huge value to the members today.
Great stuff. So what we've also got, we're really pleased to have from MSK Architects in Dural in northern New South Wales or in North Sydney, New South Wales. Nicole Rouissi joins us as well, and she's going to be a case study. And so what we'll do is we'll be watching live Dave and Nicole go through some systems of process to help MSK Architects in Dural really improve their processes as well. So Dave, over to you and take it away.
Fantastic. All right, well, let's dive straight in. Before I hop into the presentation, I just wanted to ask the question, I suppose, to all of the group. So you can start typing into the chat box and then we'll also get Nicole to chime in as well. I just want to set the tone right to get a little bit of an idea of why people would want to systemize their business. Like, what are some of the benefits that happen from running a systemized business? Some common ones that I hear people talk about is that they want to reduce errors, improve their efficiency. They want to reduce or remove key person dependency so that if someone's off sick, that things inside the business can keep happening. Just type into the chat box what some of the benefits are that you think systems and processes and building a systemized business can bring. And maybe we'll start off as well, just as everybody's typing that in. I don't know, Nicole, if you just wanted to also unmute yourself and give me some ideas on, because I know you are just about to start down this journey and you're thinking about systemizing and why are you looking at doing that?
So we're looking at systemizing. We wanted to get onto a tender list for a state government for schools project, and to do that, one of the qualifications is that we needed to have a certified quality management system. So this is probably something, the more I've looked into it, it's quite a big system, and probably we haven't got one at the moment because we thought it was too cumbersome, but it would be like just the things you outlined there. It is, any system is better than no system, and it certainly would help in different aspects of the process of producing architectural services. So the system that we need to be certified for is a little bit daunting for me at the moment. As I look through it, it's quite sort of large and goes through absolutely every aspect of the practice. So I'm trying to get my head around that at the moment.
So just so I have a little bit of back history as well on your business, what sort of size practice are you? Where are you located? And what type of jobs are you going for? And it sounds like, I mean, systems are important for being able to go for tenders because sometimes they require that ISO accreditation. But I'd love to find out a little bit more about the business itself.
So we're a small to medium size architectural firm. We're only about 7 people at the moment, and we have a few students, so that number goes up and down. We're in sort of the northern suburbs of Sydney, so we're not right in the CBD. A lot of we do all projects except residential, so we do industrial, commercial, schools, sporting facilities. We do a little bit of residential now, and especially in this economic climate, we're sort of looking to take on any work that we can, and commercial projects as well. So.
Perfect. That gives me a good idea. And I can see in the chat box some of the things that some of the members have mentioned are things like getting consistent results and outputs, looking to reduce errors and that inefficiency, looking to improve profitability, and looking to promote getting quality control, making sure that there's standardization in the delivery of the particular requirements, reducing time as well, on things that aren't core architectural related work. So there's plenty of reasons to systemize, and I don't think I've ever had a discussion with a business owner where we haven't agreed that business systems are important. Another one that I see people talk about is also exit planning. Sometimes when people build up a business, if it's so dependent on maybe the center architect or some key team members, it makes it very hard to sell the business, because the new buyer of the business is sitting there thinking, well, if the key team members are walking out the door, really, what is it that I'm buying? So that's another reason people look to systemize as well. But there are plenty of different reasons. I suppose that the second question that I wanted to ask, again, type this into the group chat, is when someone says systems and processes, what are the feelings that bubble up? Or when someone says systems and processes, how do you respond or interpret? I know, for example, sometimes when people hear systems and processes, it's typically not a super exciting topic, and I'm trying to bring the excitement and energy back to this topic, because I know it's not so much the systems but the impact that it has on the business that I get excited with. But some of the things I hear people say is when we talk about systems, they say systems remove creativity in business. I've heard people say that even if I had systems and processes in place, my team wouldn't follow them. Or maybe the business owner thinks that they need to be the person that creates all of the systems and the processes. So there are these lot of things that swim around in people's heads around systems and why they don't work, and they work in big architectural firms, but they're not going to work in my small business. Sometimes people think as well that they need to over document. So if they're going particularly for the ISO accreditation, they're very particular. There's a lot of red tape surrounding it, and you have to go to tick certain boxes. So again, that can become resistance, because teams think this extra level of documentation will create friction, and the team isn't going to want to do that, because that's just another thing that they have to think about, and they're already busy. So I'd love to hear typing in to the chat box what bubbles up, and we'll start off with Nicole as well. When we talk about systems, what comes to mind for you?
That's exactly, you feel what you've said there is the red tape. It's the extra work that would be involved, and does that take you away from the actual processes of getting the work done? So that's one thing that we feel that this extra system, is it going to be tailored just for a small practice, or is it more something that a bigger practice would normally do? So, and someone's asked, is this the ISO 9001? Yes, that's a system that we're trying to get we'll get certified for. But and a lot of that, when I'm looking through that standard, a lot of it is just the office component. There's one last section is what we consider the biggest aspect, our actual product of getting the architectural services done, and that really is the most important for us, we think. But obviously there's these other systems like client feedback and when internal auditing and things like that would help us with our service, but we don't naturally connect with it at the beginning.
Yes, yeah. I think What's interesting about this group, and I see it definitely in engineering and architectural, even accounting and bookkeeping, that there is a resonance to systems and processes already. It's like it's baked into the way that your industries work. Some industries, particularly if it's, maybe highly creative spaces, tend to resist systems more. But I'm actually seeing a heck of a lot in the chat box of reasons to systemize. There's more of those and an appreciation for them rather than also what is necessarily holding members back. There are a couple in here talking about how to make some systems work. And I can just see here, systems don't need to be cumbersome. You might find many of these procedures are already in place. System implies the potential for consistency. So again, it kind of speaks to some of the benefits. So that's good. I mean, now at least I feel like I'm preaching to the converted. So we don't need to worry about getting you guys over the line because you already appreciate the importance of it. So I'm going to go through a little bit of a presentation, and then I'm going to swap to my iPad, and we're going to talk through Nicole and her practice in a little bit more detail. And I want everybody to be always thinking about, how does this apply to my practice? How can I take what it is that I'm learning and make tweaks and improvements to really get systems and processes firing inside your business to bring all of the different benefits that we've already touched on? So I'm going to go here. Now, when I do the share screen, it's a little bit harder for me to monitor some of the questions. So I'm going to let Michael in the background just keep an eye on those for me. But Nicole, has that popped up okay for you?
Yep.
So yeah, the method that I'll be walking you through, I call it Systemology. It's the science of building business systems. And I want to cover just very quickly what I'm talking about. What is a system, to make sure that we're all on the same page. I also then want to take you through the 4 stages of business systemization. As you start to think about systemizing your business, you just want to get very clear on where you are, then very clear on where you want to get to, and then it just makes it infinitely easier to spot the bits that are missing and the areas you need to work on. We'll talk about some of the 3 critical outcomes. A lot of people think that it is a piece of software that is going to magically systemize their business and make things work. But there are actually a few moving parts. Software is one piece of it, but you also need to make sure that you have very clear certainty around the tasks that need to be performed. You need to get buy-in from the staff. So we want to make sure that we get a few things in place. Then we'll walk through what I call the Systemology model. We'll apply that to Nicole's business as just a way to identify maybe some areas for her to work on and help her prioritize. Again, you'll be applying that to your business as you go through and thinking, how does that work for me? Depending on how we go for time, we'll finish up talking about how to identify the mission critical systems in the business. I can just whip through this intro because obviously Michael gave me a great introduction. I own a digital agency called Melbourne SEO. For the last 3 years, we'd systemized it. I stepped out and I hired the lady who's just sitting to the right of me there, Melissa. She's our CEO. She runs that company. And I've really gone heavy into this space of systems. I had the good fortune of speaking in the Netherlands for a TEDx youth talk, and I talked about my approach to systems and systems thinking to life. I run the largest event in the space, which is called the Business Systems Summit, and it's industry agnostic. It doesn't matter what industry you're from. Systems applies to all businesses. It's all your business is a collection of systems, and I've been involved in lots of businesses, starting from scratch, building them up, systemizing them, and selling them. I even owned at one point a rock and roll clothing music store on Elizabeth Street in Melbourne. We had 3 stores. We had one on Bridge Road and one in Greensborough. And the reason I tell you that is just so you can have the confidence to know that what I'm going to be talking about is all applied to real world business. This is where I got all of my knowledge and learning and thinking about the challenges that we went through to remove the business owner, because a lot of people really struggled when they build up a practice. You know, You're an architect, you can do fantastic work, you might be working in an architectural firm. You go, oh, this is a great idea, maybe I'll go start my own practice. You go off and start your own architectural practice, you get a few clients here and there, and then you very quickly realize there's more to the business of running an architectural practice than just doing the architectural work. There's a range of different things. There's sales, there's marketing, there's HR, there's management, and that's all outside of doing the actual work. So what I want to try and do is, introduce this idea of how can we capture best practice and the way things are done in those different departments so that we can remove key person dependency, so that you can start to scale, so that projects don't blow out on scope. We all know in your industry, it's quite common for, someone to say, how long is this project going to take? How long is it going to cost? Great, let's double it, if not triple it, because oftentimes, things and projects very quickly blow out because they're not following a strict process, and that obviously costs time and money, and there's a lot of waste in that. The business that I work on these days is the Systemology, and it's my dream to free all business owners worldwide from the day-to-day operations of running the business. So that, with a little bit of an intro there, the what is a system is where we'll start. It's just to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. There is 1,000,001 different names. There's processes and checklists and SOPs and standard operating procedures and work instructions. And I think this also leads to a lot of the confusion in the space, because the names are interchangeable, and while when you drill down to it, the definitions, yes, there is a difference between a work instruction and a procedure. They do mean different things, but to simplify, I just use the word system. And when I say system, I'm talking about a series of steps that is followed that creates a consistent outcome. That's really all it is, a predefined set of steps that creates an outcome. And a consistent outcome, the reason I like that definition is because it works at the most granular level, like down to the point of, what is the step-by-step for issuing an invoice out of zero to your clients to get paid, up to the high-level system, which might be, well, what is the system or the procedure that you might go through, I'll say system to keep that terminology the same, that you would go through to deliver the product or service for the client. You might have phase one where you chat with the client and you get all the information that you need, and you get it into your management system, and then you have different milestones that you hit. Like, the system works at that level, very high level, but it also works at the micro level. So I think of systems in terms of regardless of whether or not you recognize these systems exist or not, you are still feeling the effects of them. So I use the example in life of an unhealthy system. An unhealthy system would be you eat poorly and you don't exercise and you sit behind a screen all day. If that is the inputs to this system, what are the outputs? We all know what happens as a result of running that unhealthy system. You become unhealthy, you become overweight, and the lesson here is, just because you don't recognize, if you said, I didn't know that was going to happen, you would still feel the effects of that system. So just because you might not notice that you're running an unhealthy system doesn't mean you're going to be immune to the effects of that unhealthy system. And it's the same in business. Your business is a collection of systems. So if you're having problems in your business, it's because you will be running unhealthy systems. Some might not be documented. Some of them might be trapped inside of the heads of your team members. Others might be documented. But again, if I think about your business as one big system, you can then break it up into subsystems. You'll have the operations, that might be the doing of the job for the client, but then you have sales and marketing and HR and finance. So if you're struggling with getting leads, you probably have poor lead generation systems. If you have poor sales, then maybe you've got enough leads, but you don't have a sales process. If you're finding that your clients are continually following you up and they're not appropriately setting expectations, and you're not appropriately setting expectations, they don't know what to expect, and they're constantly on your back, That's a reflection of poor onboarding systems and client management systems. If you've got staff that aren't doing the right thing or following the process, then I can tell you, you've probably got a poor recruitment system. So every problem relates back at the system level, and you can even drill it down more, like underneath these different departments. I always think in terms of the 80-20. What are the handful of systems in each of the different departments that deliver the bulk of the result? Now, I'm all about creating systems not just for getting ISO accreditation. More importantly for me, it's about making a business function better and reducing error and not creating a system for the system's sake. So you'll also have to take what I say with, if you're going for the ISO accreditation as well, they will have certain requirements. But for me, if you're just getting started out, it's about finding the minimum viable product. What are the minimum numbers of systems that can really hold your business together? And a system might be as simple as a document that looks like this with some bullet points out. Like this is an example we'll use. I wanted to use an architectural example, but I got called in for this webinar just a little bit too late for me to get together one of the examples to match your specific industry. But we will talk about Portavac, which is a company that helps clean roofing gutters and things like that. And I'll talk about how they systemize their business. But just before we jump over to the iPad, or while we jump over to the iPad, I just wanted to get your thoughts, Nicole, if you had any questions or if that was clear as far as just setting the stage as to what a system is and thinking about your business as a collection of systems.
No, I think that's very clear that usually I'm focused just on the production sort of side of things, all the operations as per your diagram, but it's the other ones, it's the sales and the marketing and finance and things like that, that I'm not really on top of systems for that. But if we could simplify that and bring the whole thing together in one cohesive system, I guess that would be great.
Yeah. Well, let's have a look. The first thing I want to focus on is this idea of the 4 stages of business systemization. And we'll think about where you feel like you are in the continuum, Nicole. And obviously, everybody who's listening as well, will be thinking about their own businesses and where they are up to in the process. So having worked with a good number of businesses trying to help them systemize and remove key person dependency, we find that businesses find themselves in one of 4 places. And stage number 1 is what we call survival mode. As the name suggests, it's not a great place to be. It's oftentimes, this is when your architectural practice just gets started and you're making things up as you go because you don't really have a way of doing things. You might just win a piece of work and you're kind of relying on the knowledge that's trapped inside your head. Oftentimes it feels like you're very much in firefighting mode. And it's just a matter of where's the next fire that you need to jump to try and put out that fire. Whether it's a client, outreaching to you to say, hey, where's my project up to? Whether it's responding to a lead, or you're just getting pulled in many different directions. Oftentimes as well, this is usually you've got a very micro team at this point. The biggest thing that happens at this level is you get held in, and it's oftentimes because the business owner in particular is the bottleneck. Everything seems to go through them. They want to be across every single project. They want to deliver to a certain standard, so they feel like they need to micromanage everything, and that is bad for the team. It means that they can't really grow, and performance looks a little bit like this. So that's some people can relate to that, and depends on kind of where you're at. I know some business owners will see all of the progressions, and it depends, Nicole, on when you've joined the company. And I'll walk you through all the stages before we think about where you're at. But are there other things that you could think that feeling in that survival mode might feel like?
Well, we're quite an established firm, so we're not quite in that survival mode, but we do have a sort of a recent change of business owners. So I can imagine that it could occur, but we're quite well established, so we haven't quite got that system.
And I actually find a lot of people, particularly when they attend webinars like this, they're already through the survival mode, because at least they're looking now, they understand the importance of systems. Then the next level that they move up to is, we call it stationary. Again, the name gives it away. It's not a great place to be. It's definitely better than survival mode. The characteristics that you'll find at this level is usually the systems are often stored in specific team members' heads, whether it's the business owners or others. You have a way of doing things, but it's trapped in that. So if that one person is sick or unable to come in for the day, then you find that things won't progress in their lane, their tasks that they need to be working on, which you're very person dependent. And when you have the discussion of systems, some people buy into the idea and some people don't. It's kind of a little bit of a mix. Some people like the idea of no systems as a team member, because it gives them almost like a black box that they can operate in. No one really knows what they're doing or how they're delivering, and then that gives them job security. So oftentimes you'll find people in this stage, it's that very sort of key person dependent. The key way to move through this stage is you have to extract the knowledge from the team members' heads. And at that point, I call it stationary, because performance is kind of moving up ever so slightly, but it's not, you don't get strong movement forward. It feels more like you're stuck. Sometimes even if you're just moving a little bit forward, it still feels like you're in stationary mode, because the world is changing so quickly. The next level up, and again, as everybody kind of watches this, they'll be thinking about where they are in the process. The next level up we call scalable. Now, scalable is where people think they want to get to when it comes to systems, where we're starting to get a little bit of traction now. Usually you've got things that are partially documented, not all of the things, and as Nicole alluded to before with, her focus is in the operations. Maybe the operations is really well systemized. You have a way for the way that clients come on board, the way that you brief them, the way that you invoice, or maybe not invoice, we'll just stick with the operations, the way that you onboard them, the way, you've got key steps that might go through your project management platform in the way that you deliver the project. So there's, you've got, but there might be other holes. Maybe you don't have a sales process, or you don't have key ways that you generate leads. So it's patchy, I suppose, and the solution is a bit clunky. Maybe you're storing your systems in a Dropbox folder in Word documents that's shared across multiple people's computers, or maybe it's scattered all across different team members' desktops, or it's there, it's clunky, it's just a little bit unorganized, and the team oftentimes needs reminding. Like, we have to follow the process. We have a way of doing things. Remember, when someone calls and they're interested, we take down their details, we put it into a CRM, and then you get, Joe Blogs to give them a call. That's the way that we do things, but you have to remind people. The key at this level is you need to start to organize your knowledge. So if stationary is about extracting it, then this scalable level is then about organizing it. And we start to see performance take off at this level. Are there any sort of, can you get a sense for these levels, Nicole? And is some of this resonating with you? I suppose you'll know when you kind of get a feeling for, I'm gravitated to this level.
Yes, just the last one, the scalable one, that is definitely, you know what you should be doing. And other people you think know what they should be doing, and they do it, but it's not really organised, or it's not necessarily written down. We have forms, we have sort of checklists, but maybe not everyone's aware of where they live in our system, and maybe not everyone's doing them at the right time. So yes, that one's definitely identifiable there.
Perfect. And it's funny, there's a real chance when people get to the scalable level that they get comfortable. Sometimes people think, I've got sort of some things in place, and then they stop there. But really where all of the magic happens is when you get to the last stage, which I call saleable. And saleable, whether or not you sell or not is irrelevant, but you want to get to your business to the point at which it is saleable. And what does that mean? That means that it's not dependent on any one team member. It means that you have a way of doing things. It means that you've built a business that someone can go, I can see enough value in what you're doing that I would potentially buy that business. So the characteristics here, usually you'll have all of the departments documented. You'll have it's almost like your business becomes like almost like a machine, or it has the precision of like a Swiss watch. You know, you've got this gets done, that triggers this, we then do this particular process, and it's cohesive across the teams. So you might have your operations team, but also we have a way that your sales team can then properly hand projects over. And then once we get to the end of the project, we have a way that it gets handed back to the client, and then potentially we can sell them onto other products and services and talk about the next project. So the absolute, when you know you've made it to saleable, is when your team says, this is the way that we do things here. When you get to that level, you've got ultimate buy-in, where people just go, oh, we have a way of doing things, and that's just how we do it here. When you do that, that's when you know that you've reached that final stage, and then you can start to, at this point, you optimize the result. I always think the best thing to do is first capture what you're doing. Get down what you're doing, even if it's not perfect. It's better to have consistency and everybody doing, you know, to the best of the abilities of what you know, and at least everybody's doing that before you hire in some consultant and they come in and they re-engineer parts of your process. You've got to first get everybody at least singing from the same songbook. And then that's, you really start to see performance take off at this level. And that's when you're creating something that's not person dependent, quite scalable, something that you start to get the recognition in your industry as a leader, as an authority in the space. So I think for everybody, have a think about where you are, and then that helps uncover when you think about where you're going to. Like we're gunning to get you all to saleable, but you have to go through the stages. If you're earlier in stationary stage, and you've marked yourself there, well, then you know the first thing I have to do is I have to extract the knowledge. If you're in the scalable stage, you know the key thing you need to do is organize the knowledge and start to fill in the gaps. And then if you've got those gaps filled out, then we know you're in the final stage. Then you need to start to think about optimizing it. Does that kind of make sense for you, Nicole?
It does, yes. And being a small practice, that some of, you say teams, you know, sometimes it's one person that does everything on smaller projects, and sometimes it's a team of a few people doing those things on bigger projects. And I think with architecture, it's a bit different too, that it's not just one product, it's not a building. Like sometimes we just do a feasibility study. So maybe we don't have a really good process set out for that, because it's a bit, you know, easier in our heads maybe. And this is where we're finding now, when you get new staff or new employees, that it would be really good to have, yes, an optimized system, and then everyone is really easy to get up to speed and get everyone productive.
And you hit the nail on the head, and we'll jump into that when I do the Systemology model, because the first thing you actually want to do is figure out what is the core product or service that you're selling that you know, in most cases is the best starting point for your client. Because you're right, everybody's a little bit different. You're going to be working on different projects. Things are going to come up differently. But you might go, hey, the feasibility study, that is something where most projects will start off at that point. So at least start off nailing that and systemizing that. Don't worry about the hundreds of different angles it could go in. Just focus on making that a very smooth experience. And then that, it sets the tone for the client. It helps them build confidence. You deliver really well right out of the gate. All expectations are set, and it makes things infinitely easier. Because I know in your world, the architectural world, every project's going to be different. Every location's different. Every building's different. There's a huge amount of variety, but there will be certain components that will be standard. You will have phases that you go through, milestones. You know, you'll need to get certain checks by council and I'm going to stop there because I don't know too much about the process for architects. So I think, I mean, it's the same in all business. That's what I'm really speaking to. The next thing I want to look at, and then we're going to specifically look at the way that you approach things in your firm. Oh, sorry, my microphone just got in the way there. This is more for people who may have tried to systemize in the past, but for whatever reason it hasn't quite stuck. I've done this quite a lot now, where I find when people hear about this idea of systemizing, they tend to focus on what's above the surface. And usually what's above the surface is it's some sort of software tool. It's, some sort of new project management platform, and they think that's how they systemize their business. They think, oh, if I get Asana or project, I don't know, Teamwork PM or Trello or Podio. Is there a particular project management platform, Nicole, that's well known in the architectural space by any chance?
We're using Trello a bit, and so that's one that we're using. Yep.
So sometimes people think, oh, okay, well, they hear that, oh, Nicole's using Trello, and if I just use Trello, if they're not using a project management, they think that they're going to magically become a systemized business. But that really is, it's the 10% that's above the water, but we know with an iceberg, all the action happens underneath the surface. No amount of rain and wind that's hitting the top of this iceberg is going to move it. It's the current that moves it, what's happening below the surface. So if you've tried to systemize in the past and you've just focused on the software and the tools, and maybe, you've reached some sort of resistance, then very possibly it's because you haven't got these three areas underneath that we believe are necessary to get the result. So the first one is, we call it systems certainty. And systems certainty just has to do with having a way of doing things and having it documented. So if we use the feasibility example, okay, the phone call comes in, here's how we sell them a feasibility study. Here's how we onboard the project. Here's how we ask for what data we need from them. Here's how we set it up in Trello. Here are the 6 phases that we go through. I need to collect this data. We prepare the report, and then we finish up by having a meeting with the client. Having the clarity or the certainty of what that process looks like is part of the process. So that's more of a extraction and documentation piece. Then the piece underneath that is the performance. Now, performance has to do partly with the tools. So, yes, your Trello is part of that, and maybe where you're storing your systems and your processes. Like I said, some people might use a Dropbox, other people use a particular software management platform, whatever it is. It's having those tools, but more than that, it's also about the level of accountability. So Trello is great for who does what by when, and then you need somewhere else that has the how-to. So what is the steps that need to be done? And you need to think about how those two link together. Once you get those right, that unlocks performance. So a clear way of doing things, and then the tools that support that. And then the other outcome is this one just here, which is the buy-in, which this one is the biggest one, I believe. I mean, you need all of them to make systems and processes work, but even if you have great systems and processes, if the team doesn't follow it or they don't buy into it, it really doesn't matter, because they're not going to do it anyway. So you actually have to get all three. And we find the biggest resistance always comes from the existing staff. New staff are actually fine. When you hire a new person and you onboard them and this is all they ever know, then they'll follow the process, because that's just the way that we do it here. But old staff who've been with you and have stuck in a particular method or a way of doing things, they'll go, well, why do I need to change? Like, I've always done it this way. Why do we have to document it? Why do I have to, take these details and post it into the Trello card? Can't I just lean over to James, who's sitting next to me, and say, hey, this is what I did? Whereas you're trying to create this systems culture, which then makes it know that everybody knows where to go and where to look. The good news is, right now, everything that's going on with COVID is the it is the easiest time in history to introduce change and introduce systems and processes. I'm finding that there is the lowest level of resistance because everybody has reached the point where they go, well, we know we have to change. The world is changing around me. The way that people are working is changing around me. People are working from sometimes at home, sometimes in the office, sometimes, in reduced hours, sometimes at odd hours of the day, sometimes online, like we're doing Zoom meetings more than ever. Like things are just changing. So it's a great time for you to go, I'm going to introduce a new way of doing things because that resistance is quite low. And all of that leads to the ultimate goal. As much as the three outcomes that we want is systems, performance, and buy-in, ultimately what the business owner is gunning for is actually deep below the surface. And even when I combine those three outcomes together, what's really most important and what everybody should be going for is something that I call complete business reliability. That's really what is at the base of what we're doing. You achieve certainty, performance, and buy-in, get those three down, and you get business reliability. And that's really what we're gunning for. So now what I want to have a little bit of a look at is specifically, we're going to work a bit more closely with Nicole now. We're going to talk through her business. I want to give you an idea. Everybody who's watching this now, get out an A4 piece of paper, draw what you can see on the screen at the moment, and I want you to ask the questions that I'm asking Nicole. Really what I'm doing is I'm asking you, the listener, how you would rate and think about your business. So I'll just load in here at the center of the Systemology model, and what we aim for is complete business reliability. And those three pillars are certainty, and we also want performance, and the last thing that we need is buy-in. So if we get certainty, performance, and buy-in, that's ultimately what ends up delivering complete business reliability, which is the goal. So what I've found is underneath each of these categories, there are three accelerators that if you get these three pieces right, it helps to unlock each of these. And we'll go through with Nicole thinking about her business, you obviously thinking about your business. We're going to rate them from sort of red to orange to green, and then it just gives an idea of some areas that Nicole might work on, or you might work on in your business to start to build more of a systems-based business. So let's dive through. Any questions so far, just while I sneeze, Nicole?
No. It's sounding that you've got it right there. I can see a lot of changes now in this sort of climate that we're in the business thing. So it is the time to change now. I think where people are more open to different ways of working, and let's go for it.
Perfect. And I've got that sneeze. It's just there, but it didn't happen. So I'll battle along. I may have to mute myself and sneeze. So the first one that I want to think about, and we touched on this one. I gave Nicole a little bit of a chat just before we went live with this webinar. This is the first one that I mentioned to you, Nicole, that I wanted to go through. I call it the customer experience. And maybe if we think about the feasibility study as a good example, if you were to say, to reduce that overwhelm and give the team a bit more focused, do you think, is there a clear way of doing things as far as like a flow that the customer would go through and the team would follow to be able to deliver a fantastic feasibility from, getting customers? And I know you're focused heavily in on the operation, so you might not be clear on this on the other parts, but getting customers, selling customers, onboarding, delivering, and then getting them to come back across the team. Would you say that that has been defined and each of the team members know what that process looks like, or is it kind of everybody just kind of sticks to their own department? And how would you rate it, I suppose, from green, orange, or red?
What's the rating? What's the green, orange,
Yeah,
and red?
so I would say red would be no one really has any idea what the other team members are doing, and everybody kind of just focuses on their own little bit, and there's not a clear, I suppose, customer journey. Whereas green would be the other end of the spectrum, which is, hey, we have a very clear customer journey. The whole team knows what that is and the process that a customer would go through.
I would say we're in between orange and green. Like we, because we're a small firm. This is the other thing, that there's only three people maybe working on a project, and we're all in we're not always in the same office at the moment, but everyone's included in just establishing the scope, so we know what we're trying to do and what we're working with the site and things like that, and who the client is. We try and keep it simple in our firm. We have one point of contact for the client, so that person has a relationship with the client, but also that person in our firm has to obviously forward on any information they get to the rest of the team and for the work.
Look, I'll put it as the orange, because I think part of what you're talking about speaks to the idea that being a smaller team, you've got a way of doing things, but it still sounds like it's more trapped in the head of a team member. So you've got a way of doing things, but maybe if certain team members weren't there, certain parts of that aren't going to happen because they're just not there to follow it.
Sure.
The next one I'll move across to for simplified systems is the next one across. Is there a consistent way that a system or a process is made inside the organization? Like, do you have a system for creating systems, or is there a systems culture there where people know, right, if we want to create a way of doing things, we have a process for the way that that's done? And again, if we rank that, or I suppose even to put it even more simply, if you asked another team member to create a simple system, how easily would they be able to do that? Whereas, maybe red is, if they created it, would probably look like a dog's breakfast. Whereas, green might be, yes, they could create really solid optimized systems that could easily be transferable. And obviously it would also vary a little bit from team member to team member. But how would you rate that?
Probably orange as well. It's so when you said it's creating systems for systems, it's so someone else in the team, they would be able to carry on the project if someone else wasn't there. Is that the kind of thing that you're asking?
and more so just the ability for the team to create a system or a process. So we always find with systems, some people, when they first think about systems, they think it's a one and done approach, whereas systems is an ongoing process that becomes part of the way that you have the culture in the team. So you want the team to have an understanding of the way that systems are created, the way that systems are improved, and people look and think for systemized ways of solving regular problems.
I think we're pretty, and this is the thing with who you employ too, I guess. We sort of want people who are experienced so they can work by themselves, like within their own system. And if someone's not there in the team, they can continue working on. They've got a good idea of what's required for each project, especially for drawings and approvals and things like that. Those are the kind of systems we probably already have pretty much in place. They're not necessarily documented in a step-by-step thing, but they are, especially with council approvals, we obviously have to go through all these council sort of hoops and things to tick boxes with them, and we know what we need for our documentation and things like that. We've all got a good idea, so
perfect.
It's
and I'm mindful of making sure that we stick to our 1 o'clock, because I know Mike's going to jump in. I'm going to move just a little bit quicker through these next couple. So when we think about the The next one here, systems completion. If the customer journey is one set of systems, and you may or may not know this because I know you focus more in the operations side of things, how would you rate the systems in the other departments in the business? Are there, a system for the way that you hire someone and onboard a staff? Is there some systems for your finance, the way that things are issued out invoice wise, or those sorts of things outside of the original customer experience? Is there any documentation for those areas?
Not really, and that's probably where we're coming into when we're trying to get certified. This is where we should have more documentation in staff induction when they start, and processes. The financial, the invoicing, I know we do it monthly, but I'm not really familiar with that sort of aspect of the business. But there's different aspects of systems that we definitely, client feedback, like we go through the whole process. Like building a building can take up to 18 months or something for something, and you think the client is really happy, but at the end, but we probably don't have a system in place where we get a written feedback from the client. Yep. And if you go back in 6 months' time and they have a leaky window or something, and that would affect. So we really should sort of, for example, ask for feedback when they're really happy with the building.
Yes.
And different aspects of how you handle issues in the process as well. So there's lots of different problems that come up, and you solve them as you go, and the client's really appreciative in different aspects. But if you ask, like a year later, are you happy? We should ask and get better testimonials, I guess, for
So there's obviously some improvement in that that particular area, and really all this is, it's just almost like a diagnostic tool. Then you can kind of go later on, we'll get you a copy of the recording and then this document, and then you can kind of narrow in on some of these areas. So this next one, it sounds like you've got part of this down. I mean, we always say that complexity is the enemy of systemization. So we always look for simple software, simple solutions. Trello is a great platform. As far as your tool set is concerned, how would you rate your tool set? And where are you do you have any documented systems and processes, and where are they saved at the moment?
So just on our standard database, I guess it's we have like administration and
and they're just like Word documents.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. So it's So as far as your software stack is concerned, how would you rate that? Is that where we say something like you've got a Frankenstein set of tools where it doesn't feel like anything really connects together, whereas
I'd say that one, yes.
Pardon?
I would say that one, yes. We have a few different systems, and probably, speaking for myself, I'm probably not across every one of them. I probably use, I think this is me with technology, I use like 30% of its potential of everything we have, and it's probably better if we streamline that.
So I reckon that's good as well. So I'm going to say and if you think about it, each one of these categories we're going to addresses that particular area. So the first three we went through is certainty. Next three we've got is the performance. Now these next two, they kind of relate together. So I'm going to put them together. It's almost like the first one is, we call it a dashboard, and then the second one is the assurance planner. So as far as, again, this all relates back to the performance. Do you guys have any form of dashboard that gives the high-level important numbers, numbers of leads, sales, maybe number of open projects, just something that gives the business owner and the key team members an idea of where the business is up to?
So we have a weekly sort of a staff meeting, and we have a list of our projects that are underway, our list of prospective projects.
Yep.
And discuss with everyone where we're at and how we're going with those.
Perfect. And similarly, along with the assurance planner, this is then also thinking about how to improve some of those metrics. So you have a weekly meeting which kind of gets the pulse of what's happening. Do you have anything then that you're able to then plan as far as your goals, or hey, we need to improve this or that particular area of the business?
The business as a whole, or for different projects?
Usually specific to specific metrics. So a dashboard oftentimes gets related back to specific numbers. So you might go, we had, X number of new inquiries, X number of proposals, and we've got X number of clients that have completed. So they might be numbers that get reported on, and then the assurance planner is then about what's the goal for that? Like, how do you set targets for what you're going to do in the next quarter? Do you have anything like that in place?
I don't do that personally. So the business owner, he would,
Yep.
he has more systems in place. I know he's got a whiteboard, and and he probably uses some software as well about what he needs to do, more leads, and we're always talking about more leads and things like that. But definitely we have a sort of goals for each week necessarily about, maybe it's more projects, what we need to achieve, but also how to follow up on other leads and things.
Yeah, perfect. And then the last few just down here that we'll have a look at. This next one's the strength locator. Is it clear on your team what everybody does and who's good at what? So, this person is great at handling this particular problem or that particular problem. Is there clarity around that for the team?
Yeah, I think we were pretty clear on that one. Different people in the office have different strengths, and that's really acknowledged. And we're only a small firm, so we talk about things from job to job and interact a lot.
Perfect. And then the next one we've got is the people systems. And you touched on that when we were talking about the systems completion or the system complete area, specifically around the idea of systems. Do you have any systems for hiring, onboarding, and also introducing your way of doing things, like an induction or a way for someone to go, oh, I know what I'm meant to do here?
No, I think this is the one that I'm more conscious of, because it's probably my responsibility to show people these kind of things. So we're a firm that's been, we've sort of changed over a lot of time. We've had a few different owners and partners and things. So we've had a system, and it's morphed into another system. It's morphed into another system. And I think now is an opportunity when we're going for certification to get a current system that's cohesive and current. I think is.
And then the last one I'm going to ask is we call it automatic accountability. And if the strength locator is about understanding what people are good at and what some people aren't good at, similarly, this one, automatic accountability, has to do with almost like an org chart and things like position descriptions, so that, and that might relate to the onboarding, but you want someone to kind of know what they're responsible for. Do you have anything like that in place?
We do have checks. So we have people who document, and then someone who's more experienced that's not on that project and not familiar with it to check the documentation, for example. So that's a really good way of checking, like drawings for example, that are going out of the office.
Yep. And how about, like, do you have a position description? Like, do you know what your role in the business is? Oftentimes smaller businesses tend not to have them because everybody does a little bit of everything.
So I guess I do. I'm more in the construction phase and the project management phase. We have a design director. We have the principals. So we do have people that acknowledge that are specialise in different aspects of our service. Is that what you're after?
Yeah. I'll pop it as orange. It is, almost like a position description. Basically, is a way for you to go, here's my role, here's my responsibilities, that sort of thing. So what I'll do, we've got the recording from this, and I can send you a copy of that. The whole purpose of that exercise is to try and spot some of the holes, and we kind of identified some of the red areas, and that gives you an idea on things that you need to narrow in on. So specifically, systems for the rest of the business, particularly around your people, processes, and also getting your software in place. So the last little bit that I'll run through, and then I think we're going to jump straight to Mike, is just then the process you go through. Once you understand the holes and where you're at, it's about capturing and extracting and then organising all of this info. So Dave at Portavac, they run that roofing gutter cleaning company I was talking about. They identified someone in their team called the systems champion, which it kind of feels like that's what you are, Nicole. You're like the systems champion. And we start off by identifying that critical client flow, which is just that single linear journey that we might have said, for example, the feasibility study. Then you identify what are the systems required to deliver that flow and who is responsible and who has the knowledge. So you can then capture that. I always suggest just recording, very simply, might be a screen recording. In the example of Portavac, they went out and recorded with a GoPro out in the field. But I think obviously for architectural firms, oftentimes you're working behind a screen anyway in Zoom meetings, so it's quite easy for you to just record what's going on. Then you take those videos and you pull the documentation out from that. And it's just a process of going through the critical most systems, recording them, documenting them, and getting them into a central location where everybody knows this is where we go when I need to answer that particular question. So it's what we'll do now, and we'll get you a chance to say any final words, Nicole, and then I'm going to pass to Michael to see if he's got any questions that have come through the chat box. But thank you very much for going through. I know you kind of opened up on where your business is at and appreciate that because it helps everybody. They hear this, they think about where is their business. And I hope you got something from that session as well and a little bit of insight. But are there any final points that you want to comment on or anything you want to take away? And then we'll just pass to Michael.
No, I'm happy to participate and help everyone else out in the industry. So it's just I guess it's a level of comfort that other people are sort of struggling. They don't necessarily have all these magic systems in place. Every business would have a separate system. So it's just a process that's probably good to go through, but you tend not to until you have to. So, and now is a good time to do it when, maybe things are a little bit quieter and we're more open to change.
You're spot on. A particularly smaller business, like we'll talk to some of the larger architectural firms. I talked to Michael and he was like, hey, some of these guys have this nailed. The hardest bit is the bridge from being a small business to a large business and getting systems in without overdoing it. You've got to keep it fine line. And that's, I've got a book that I'm launching called Systemology. That's what's on the screen. It comes out in August and it talks about a lot of the approach that we've talked about today in more detail. So if someone wants to find out how we approach it, that's where they do it. But Michael, I'll hand to you. Thanks again, Nicole. And then Michael, I'm not sure if you had any final questions or things that had come through from the chat or if we're over time.
No, plenty of time. It's all good. Totally fine with me. I know that you have a 1 p.m. meeting. I saw it come up on your iPad, so just apologise to Seb, Linda, because you're going to be a little bit late. I'm so sorry about that. A huge thank you to Nicole at MSK Architects and Dural in Northern Sydney. I will say, for those of you, look, a lot of people had a great advice for Nicole during this session. So I would say, to be honest, if anybody does want to get in touch with Nicole and share their process stories or their journeys related to how they improved their systems, then get in touch with me and I'll happily connect you with Nicole. So please make sure that if you have got any great advice for Nicole and her team at MSK, we're all in this together. Please do not hesitate to jump on the email to me and I'll put you in touch with her. A couple of questions came through. Funny, you're talking about unhealthy systems. All we've done for the last 3 months is eat unhealthily, sit behind our screens without taking a break and not move. So I need to fix that. And that's a process I need to start rectifying. Now, this is interesting. You talked about one question here, and this was, Dave, when you said, this is the way we do things here. You have a great team when people say, this is the way we do things here. But how often, this is something that I really struggle with. A lot of people can also say, this is the way we've always done things here. And that is, to me, one of the biggest challenges that anybody can face in any organisation, trade, profession, industry sector. It doesn't matter. There are always those people that are firmly wedded to systems and processes which are antiquated, which take time, which really slow everybody down and don't deliver the results that we need. How do you bring those people on the journey? We all probably, if we put our minds to it, could think of people that we've worked with, both past and present, who are wedded to things of the past. How do we change them and how do we bring them on that journey?
Yeah. So this speaks to the culture that you bring or build up in the business. And the larger the organization gets, the harder it becomes to change culture, because you're right, people just get stuck in their ways. The culture will set the tone for what's acceptable and what's not. So depending on where you're at, I think the earlier you can introduce systems thinking, the better. I'm obviously a little bit biased, but I think you can do it, the better. For the people that may be stuck in the way that they do things, the biggest thing that you can do is think about it from their point of view and think about what is the benefit to them for systemizing. So if you can phrase it, and it'll vary from person to person. If you say to people, you know what it's like when you go away on holidays and you take a week off and you come back and then there's 1,000 emails in your inbox, nothing's moved forward, and it takes you the next 2 months to try and catch up for the 1 week that you had off. Well, by systemizing, what we're looking at doing is to keep things moving so you can have a break, have a restful time off, and know that everything's okay. Or maybe it could be for another team member, they want to move up the ranks, and you say, look, for you to move up, we need to be able to plug another team member in to do parts of your role. So the only way that you can become more senior and more valuable to the business is by systemizing what you're doing, and that helps to get them buying in. As far as changing systems are concerned, if it's about changing a way that something is done, generally speaking, you look towards the best performing team member who is doing that thing really well, and you say, this person is creating the best results. Let's everybody just follow what they're doing. Let's model what they're doing and bring everybody up to the standard. So it's a complex issue, and it will vary on the team, and some people will be just completely resistant. But as I said, now is the easiest time. If you can't get them over the line now, you will probably never get them over the line.
Yeah, it's an ongoing challenge, and I think everyone on this call will always have worked with someone. I always feel that there's someone in every organisation that is always wedded to doing things the traditional way, and there are some people that are just scared stiff of change. You mentioned the C word, and people just go grey with horror. Change. Everybody wants change, but no one wants to actually implement it at their end. I find that really fascinating. As someone who is admittedly self-diagnosed as an OCD person, I mean, you talked earlier about apologising for your case study that you didn't have time to prepare. And I will say to everybody, we didn't know that we were going to have Dave online until 9:30 p.m. last night. But what I am proud of is that we had a really good system and process in place. Our production team got into play, and we confirmed Dave, and 10 minutes later we had this event locked in and done. In terms of certainty and confidence, I mean, the attributes of people that need to influence change and really be ambassadors for doing better systems and processes and that kind of stuff, how important are characteristics of a leader or someone in a team to really embed these messages which will result in positive change?
It's an interesting one, because very often the business owner is the worst person in the organization to be documenting and leading the charge. A business owner is often they're big picture thinkers. They have visions of the future. They have real trouble when it gets down to the micro. So oftentimes, if the business owner recognizes systems and processes are important, but I'm not the best person to lead the charge, sometimes it's actually great to get the operations person, the right-hand man or woman who is detail-orientated, who gets this, who manages teams. We see this a lot in great organizations where there are effectively two leaders. You've got the visionary, and then you've got the integrator or the operations person. Like I think in Disney, there was Walt Disney, everybody knows, but you don't know about Roy, who is his brother, who did all the operation stuff. Henry Ford is the visionary that everybody knows, but you don't hear about James Couzens. Or there's plenty of examples where you've got these two types of people. So as long as you recognize as the business owner, you may not be the best person, and that's okay. As long as everybody knows systems are important, so you need to drive towards it. And if it's not you, you have to find the people in the organization with the right characteristics, with that attention to detail, who like systems. Don't try and push a square peg into a round hole. If someone really doesn't like systems, you don't want to beat them over the head with it and then try and get them to document all of their systems and processes. It's not good for anybody, and you won't get a great outcome. They won't enjoy it, and everybody will end up frustrated. So you have to find the right people and give them the right power to drive this.
It is important because quite often strategy in terms of, developing processes and introducing new systems is done by the very senior people at any organization, and quite often they're not the right people to do the job. So it's a really good lesson for us to think about casting the net wider and actually identifying the experts in any organization who can really help on that front. I realise we've gone 10 minutes, Dave, past your previous appointment, and I apologise for making you late and delaying your day.
No, that's okay.
I profusely apologise. We could, of course, talk all day, but I just want to say thank you, a huge thank you to you for stepping in at the last minute. Sadly, to everybody else on the chat, our previous speaker who we had booked in for today had to exit due to illness overnight. So we're really very blessed to be able to get Dave in and to give us such a fantastic presentation. This session is being recorded, so we'll have this live up on our website later on during our COVID-19, on our dedicated COVID-19 resource page. You can click there. I've also put the link in the chat box as well. If you want to scroll back through that, you can download the presentation when Zoom sends it to us later on. So that is it. Thank you, Dave Jenyns. It's been great to talk to you. I'm really pleased. Systemology, remind me when it's out, August, correct?
Yes, the 18th of August, 2020. Get it at systemology.com/book, or just head to Amazon.
Okay, great stuff. That's great. And we wish you all the very best with your book release. I'm sure that we'll grab a couple of copies as well in due course, because we do need to look at our systems both at the Institute and also across some of the other areas that we work with across the architectural profession. So thank you very much. That is it for today, everybody. Great to have you with me. As always, I've been Michael Linky, the GM here at the Institute of Architects, reporting live from COVID-ridden Melbourne. And I look forward to catching up with you on Tuesday. We have another lean-in, which is being promoted on our website as well. So have a look at that. Huge thanks again to Dave. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great weekend. And I look forward to catching up with you all at another lean-in on Tuesday. Stay safe. Cheers.